Hi, I'm Jordan Kim. I'm an editor on Documentary Now.
Hi, I'm Micah Gardner. I'm an editor on Documentary Now. We're here at Sundance. So with Documentary Now, we're premiering some episodes on the first Sunday of Sundance 2019. We usually just do kind of a party premiere in Los Angeles or New York, but this is the first year we're bringing it to the people. And and then we'll be on IFC in February. That's when we'll premiere, and we'll be on Netflix in August or something like that. That's how people watch the show. Um, Documentary Now is a comedy show where we lovingly parody documentaries that actually exist. So the first season we did Nanook of the North, the Maisels Brothers' Great Gardens. We did a Vice episode, and we found documentaries basically as a framework for telling more comedic stories. But the characterization and the filmmaking is all very authentic and done lovingly and with a lot of care. We take our jobs too seriously sometimes in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so I started. We're about to premiere our third season, and I started this year. This is my first season, but I'd worked with Micah previously on Portlandia, which has a lot of overlap in crew. And one of the things that Micah said going into the show is that sometimes we think about Portlandia as a very editor oriented show in that we have a lot of we're kind of driving a lot of the choices of the timing, obviously, but it has a very specific timing, I guess I would say, and kind of in another way, he considers Documentary Now like a cinematographer's show, and a lot of that is kind of to speak to the authenticity of the look and the tone, where we're really trying to capture authentically. The spirit of what we're paying homage to, and it's oftentimes a huge variety of formats and time periods. And so Alex Bono and Reese Thomas are directors. They come previously from SNL and have a lot of experience there, obviously, but I think they wanted to kind of bring a little bit more of a comedic vibe to a marriage of the comedic background that they have and an authentic kind of like recreation of these different documentaries, just on a visual level. So they spend a lot of time, matching lenses, and we have a grain guy
Yeah, we
that
do.
has
Here.
his own, very long presentation that he would love to give people. Um,
What do you shoot on?
So we shoot primarily it's red in that it gives us like a lot of I think Red Dragon. It gives us the first of all resolution. We finish the show 1080p, so if they're shooting 4K or 5K, then we have a lot of latitude for punching in. And then also a lot of color latitude, so we can tweak the color to crazy places. And Alex Bono, who doubles as director and cinematographer, he knows so much about lenses and old lenses that exist that people don't really want anymore, but their collectors still have them. So for one of the first episodes of the show, he contacted one of the Maisels brothers and used the same like lens that was used, I think, on Great Gardens or on Salesman. I don't know if it was the exact same, but it was the exact same make and model. And it's a beautiful, I don't know if anybody would use it for other purposes, but it's this crop like 4:3. You have to crop it essentially, or else there's vignetting, and it softens and it makes our actors look just like they are these guys, these businessmen in the 60s. It's incredible. And what it does to the light. I've never seen digital cinema kind of look that way.
I think also, so one of the episodes that is premiering or showing at Sundance tomorrow is also shot on lenses that were authentic to the time. In fact, I think it was another situation where he went to the director, the Pennebaker.
D.A. Pennebaker,
Yeah, and got the actual lenses that were used to shoot the original documentary Company for our version called Co-op. And yeah, just like Micah says, it's crazy how even when you shoot digital, if you use those vintage lenses, it does a lot of the work for you of getting it to look like it's from the time period.
We do for this show, one editor takes one episode and kind of does the deep dive into that source material. And then other editors will weigh in on the episode in whatever capacity is helpful. Either sometimes they'll help on graphics, VFX, sound stuff, but for the most part, just giving creative notes when it's like time for a screening. But there is this aspect of one editor getting really lost in an episode. We take really seriously, we take every cut so seriously. So even if we need to rush a cut for the network, for like promo purposes, so we're only cutting one scene, we want that to look like what the scene is going to look like. And that involves a lot. It involves a lot of plugins and maybe some work that doesn't, on a traditional process, come in towards the end. So we rely a lot on Red Giant's Universe package. And we cut in Adobe Premiere and their adjustment layers, where it functions in a similar way to Photoshop and After Effects adjustment layers. Put it on the top layer where you basically are setting a look with lumetri color and then grain packages. We also have our own grain packages that we do have like a texture specialist for when we finally go through color. And that's its own subject, I guess. But for temp purposes, being able to do that really quickly is amazing because you sort of like see the image grained and colored, and then you put like, a low pass filter to approximate the old sound. We have our own like tricks up our sleeve, but it already gets you into the narrative. So it's not just relying on production design and good acting or storytelling to bring you in. We're actually able to use kind of film texture and what the image looks like to commit to the conceit, which I love because it just adds another dimension of storytelling and joke telling for our show.
Right. Yeah, and I think one thing that's kind of unique about the way that Micah and I have been able to work is a lot of the shows that we've worked on, we've been doing a lot of the graphics and the effects as well as the editing, and it's very integrated in that way, which is, I think, one of the main reasons we use Adobe. It's because we're going back and forth with Premiere and After Effects and Photoshop and
don't tell the union we're doing that.
And Illustrator and all those things. And it's just really helpful to be able to have it all integrated in that way because I'm going back and forth all the time.
It's amazing.
I don't know how common that is. I feel like it's not super common.
It's not.
But it just happens to be that like on the kind of circle of productions and people that we've worked with, that's kind of what's expected, or the kind of legacy of the people that kind of came before us and stuff like that is a lot of people with overlapping kind of and faceted responsibilities, basically.
What I think is, so the editorial mindset we have for the show is really directorial, and we're blessed with directors who give us that leeway. We're ultimately all collaborating, and they're able to decide ultimately with whenever there's disagreement for brokering that, but it's super collaborative.
There's a lot of room.
It gives us room to and it encourages us to think in a directorial way, which is consistent with documentary filmmaking. So ours are scripted, but there's improvised elements, and we're always trying to find this extra element in the post-production process. So it also psychologically really helps me feel more invested in my job as an editor, where I feel like I can make a directorial decision. I'm not necessarily talking to actors, but I'm making musical and rhythmic choices that are kind of ones that haven't been thought of before. Kind of that's able to be a contribution. Any tips for making an edit funnier or trying to find it is really being initially just really start developing your instinct for what you find funny. Because that can be a huge asset that you'll bring to either a comedian who wants you to edit and direct for them, or a director who... showrunner. Take your comedic instincts seriously. If it doesn't get a laugh the first few times you're watching it in the footage, then there's a chance it could still be funny, but you really want to... upon that first viewing of footage, if something makes you laugh, you want to fight to get that in there. And a lot of times for me, it looks like a funny look on the actor's face. I will try so hard to get that in there, or a certain intonation. I'd also say that it's not only just written jokes that are funny, but mannerisms that can be funny. Rhythms, like cutting off someone's rhythm. Just anything that sort of interrupts the predictability of maybe a normal rhythm that a scene has. And I guess, I mean, I'll hand this to you in a second, but one other thing that can always make something funny is just try blowing it up. Like, try kind of making fun of the conceit of the scene a little bit. Blowing it up and just making a different move that nobody would expect. Because sometimes the joke can become in the fact that you edited it that way, that you cut off a scene way too soon, or that you cut to a face that's confused when it's supposed to be like maybe loving or understanding. And try it. I think it might not always work, but it's somewhat foolish to not try something if there's a chance that it can add another element of comedy and make it more eccentric, essentially. Which we do a ton of on the show, because the sense of humor is not straightforward. It's a little, it's oddball.
Right. Yeah. Usually my approach to a lot of the stuff that we work on is kind of based around my, like Micah was saying, kind of my own sensibility, which is finding the quirkiest moments and the like just most surprising performance that it doesn't also feel out of character with the tone of the show or that moment. So stuff that feels spontaneous and not overly kind of rehearsed, I will oftentimes try to get that in there if I can. And that comes from working on Portlandia, where it was a lot of improv, and I would usually base scenes around the moments that I thought were funniest and then try to work the story around that. Yeah. Instead of like trying to find the story first, I would mark the things in the footage that made me laugh the most and use that as the starting point and try to figure out how to get there. So it's not as easy to do that on shows that aren't improvised, but when there are moments of improvisation that are really working, sometimes that can be, a lot better than what was scripted. And they'll feel more off the cuff and natural, which I usually like.
Sound effects too.
Yeah.
Either silly sound effects or sound effects that are just a little
lot
too
of
loud.
A lot of boings, a lot of zoings. Like a clown horn.
I actually don't like slide whistles.
Those kind of things. Put those in as much as possible.
I once, for a documentary now, scene, I once put in, I don't know anything about planes, so I put in like a really dinky plane sound for a serious plane, and that got a laugh during a screening that we kept in. That was accidental, because I just don't know anything about planes. That ended up being kind of funny. Yeah. Or like if anybody ever gets slapped or hit, I was just like amping up just a few decibels that slap. So it sounds like it hurts more, or it sounds a little silly. I did a lot of that in one of the episodes that's premiering tomorrow. We'll see how the people respond.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a cliche, but I feel like a lot of comedy is about surprise. So a lot of times when you feel like a premise is going one way, if you can make a left turn, then hopefully that's one way to get a laugh,
Yeah. One thing we do in documentary now for comedy purposes is really commit to the conceit. So a lot of times, like, it's almost there's the idea of pathos, the flip side. It's not just drama and like something that's sad, that's tragic, but pathos can also be comedic. And we like to toe the line of that, where there are authentic moments of characters really investing and feeling there's a lot on the line, and digging into their commitment and their investment in
especially an investment in an absurd premise.
Yes. Yeah. That's we did an episode last season.
Investment in an absurd situation.
We did an episode last season where that was based on Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Right.
And Chef's Table. So this very like poetic approach to food. And Fred Armisen, one of the stars of our show, I think the first time you meet him in that episode, he's trying to soften rice before it hits the boil. And he's trying to impress his father, who's this incredible chef. And Fred just takes this giant bag of rice and for an hour is just like smacking it against a tree. And this is like very comedic, but his commitment to it is based in this emotional place of wanting to prove to his father that he can prep food the proper way. And then the bag of rice spills open in slow motion. And I love that it's a show where that conceit is something that makes sense in the world where we've created. It's very silly, but I love that kind of sense of humor.
Same, yeah.
Yeah.